We're throwing off the filters of tradition and culture to discover what the Bible really says about our relationships with God, with ourselves, and with others. Welcome to this episode of Relationship Truth Unfiltered. Thank you for joining us on Relationship Truth Unfiltered. I'm Julie Sedenko, and I'm going to try to pronounce my guest name correctly. It's Karin Engelbrecht. Is that right?
Yes, close enough.
Close enough. All right. I didn't quite do it. Okay. Karin is from a coastal town near Cape Town, South Africa. She was a missionary for 20 years in Zambia and married nearly 39 years. Today, she's graciously offered to tell her story of being in ministry while also being in a destructive marriage. Karin, thank you so much for being here to tell your story.
Thank you, Julie. It's an honor and a privilege to share a little bit of my journey with all of you. Thank you.
Give us a little bit of history of your marriage and what was going on.
I married as a young new Christian, and shortly after the marriage, I realized I felt that something was wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. One of the things that kept on cropping up was that he had a very controlling manner, especially time spent away from him. For instance, if I had a coffee date with girlfriends, he would want to know who I was going with, who all were going to be there, where we were going to go, how long we were going to be there, and exactly what time I was going to be back. And if I was even 5 minutes late from the time that I had said I would be home, I would receive a very cold reception. He would make his disapproval and his disappointment known to me. And it made me feel small and helpless, like a child being reprimanded by an angry parent. And I had to be available to him. I was there to fulfill all his needs. When he came home from work, I had to be there, dinner ready, house spotless. And I had to be available emotionally, mentally, and physically. And that meant in the early years, daily sex. And sometimes even twice per day if he came home during lunch times. But I think the thing that really bothered me most was the fact that we couldn't connect at a deeper level. I felt that I could never have a really meaningful conversation with him. He was always right. His opinions mattered most. And if I dared to express my own opinion or perhaps disagree with him, he would become very defensive and argumentative. He would gaslight me. It was crazy making talk, and often it would go around in circles, and it would leave me feeling bewildered and stupid and confused. And then his response would be to withdraw and give me the silent treatment. And he would become the victim. Somehow he felt that this was a vicious attack on his character.
Can you give me an example, Karin, where you could maybe describe to our listeners what this looked like, and maybe they would recognize it in their own marriage or relationship?
Right. For instance, if in a conversation and I disagreed with him, let's say we spoke about we're going to go to church on Sunday and we'll go to the 9 o'clock meeting. I'm just using a very simple example. And if I say to him, that's fine, but could we perhaps consider going to the 10 o'clock meeting because I have such and such and such things to do, get the kids ready or whatever, he would immediately feel that I was attacking him because I'm not agreeing with him. And he would say things like, well, why did you not tell me this beforehand? Now you come out with this. We always go to the 9 o'clock meeting. And that would then put us on the crazy making cycle. And the thing is that in the end, I would just give in to keep the peace and to try and patch things up. And so to make him feel better, because he would always come across as being hard done by, like everybody is against him and he's the victim. I don't know if that is perhaps sort of a clear example.
Yeah, I think so. But, obviously with something like your example, it's like, okay, fine. It's one thing to give in and go to the 9 o'clock.
Right.
But it was more serious things as well.
It was. And even trying to address perhaps something that I saw a behavior problem,
Yes.
or a word that he had spoken, perhaps a sarcastic joke that I felt was uncalled for, or that hurt me. That was so difficult to even try and bring to his attention, because he would react to that by projecting it back on me often, minimizing it, saying it wasn't that bad, or you're too sensitive. So, it was like speaking to a wall. You just could never get any further. And
So anything
again,
that he perceived as criticism
yes,
was fodder for war.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And even criticism from other people, perceived criticism from other people, then my role would be to comfort him and to make him feel good.
And to take his side, even if he was wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is that in our relationship, it wasn't all bad all the time.
Isn't that the
And
confusing part?
it is very much, very much. So it was this huge emotional pendulum, because he could be very friendly, he could be kind, considerate, even understanding, especially in front of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So he would project this very charming, godly man of God. And yet, at the turn of a hat, he could change and become this very vindictive, sarcastic person who could really hurt with his words. So for me, it was a very, very difficult thing to really find solid ground. So I always felt uncertain, unsure which way was this going to go. It left me feeling anxious and stressed. And yet, nobody knew about this. It was so covert, very subtle, hard to define, because I could read him in situations, because could even be a facial expression. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew exactly what that would mean. But other people would not even pick up on that. And so family and friends were not aware. We put up a very good front. Yeah.
Tell me what that felt like emotionally to you, to
Oh,
know that you were unhappy and yet everybody thought it was fine and you had to kind of put on this
oh.
mask all the time. What was that like for you inside?
You know, it really is devastating. The thing is that I assumed on one level that this was also normal, because all marriages go through ups and downs, right?
Absolutely.
We hardly knew each other when we got married. It was a whirlwind romance, so we didn't have time to really get to know each other. And so my thought is, even though this is happening and I know something is wrong, I was going to make sure that we get the right help. We were going to fix this. And so I sought marriage counseling. I sought, marriage enrichment seminars, DVDs, books, which we hardly ever finished, but nevertheless tried to do that. And sadly, most of the feedback that I would get during sessions, like in a marriage counseling session, would be to, pray more, submit more, trust God, more, be the humble one, and so on. And I would go and I would cry before the Lord, and I'd say, I'm sorry, I'm going to try harder. And please just give me the patience to be this godly wife and mother that is the desire of my heart.
Did you feel, though, in those counseling sessions unheard, or did you take it away as it really is just me not trying hard enough?
I think both. Many times I felt like the counselors wanted a quick fix, and then I would go away feeling that it's on me. I'm the wife. I'm the one that's to blame. I'm the one that must fix this, because we're taught that the husband is the head of the home. We must submit, pray more, trust God more. And so it left me feeling absolutely hopeless and frustrated, because I tried as hard as I could and nothing changed. I often thought maybe it's a communication problem. If we just had better communication skills, then that would be, we could solve the problem. But it wasn't that. And yet I tried all these things. And the thing is that the outcome of that was that I made excuses for his behavior. I put it down to cultural differences. Maybe, his family of origin, he was rejected as a child. And
where was he from?
He was from Rhodesia, or Zimbabwe. Today it's Zimbabwe. And, he had gone through a period of 8 years of war. And all those things, I'm sure, did have an influence and definitely played a part in his makeup. But honestly, that wasn't really what was happening on ground level. I tried to address those things as well and get help for him. But he would go for a session or two with a counselor, but he never followed through.
Karin, I think that's so important. It's so important for especially those women who are listening that are bending over backwards to get help for their husbands.
Yeah.
Don't want it. If they're not seeking help for themselves,
absolutely,
they don't want the help that you're getting them. And you are like a hamster on a wheel, and the frustration builds and builds and builds and builds until you blow up, and then you look like the destructive person. If your husband wants the help, he's going to get it, right? But like in your case, you had a husband that refused to even look at himself or acknowledge that he needed help.
Absolutely. And the toll of that on my health was enormous, because after 28 years of marriage, of which we had then spent 14 years in full-time ministry in Zambia as missionaries, I had a complete breakdown. I was totally burnt out. My soul felt battered and bruised. I was depleted on all levels. I remember going into the shower, just turning on the water to drown out my cries. But, I would then dry my tears and come out and try to continue. But I had reached a point where I could not function any longer. And I felt like a complete failure in my marriage, in the ministry, towards my children. I just felt alone and condemned and totally misunderstood. And so I spent 3 months off the field, and I semi-recovered and then went back to Zambia. And sadly, the bad behavior had escalated then. Our children were now adults, and they were no longer in our home. And so I was now totally isolated and dependent on my ex.
And you're also not as distracted by the needs of children.
Absolutely. And one of my coping mechanisms were to keep busy. And of course, you're busy with the children. I homeschooled them and so on and so forth. So now that was a way. So now it was very, very intense. And I fell into a deep, deep depression. It was a very, very dark time in my
I think
life.
too, Karin, I would love for you to just speak to the fact that you were a missionary and in ministry adds another level of pain, I think, to this, because there is, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's harder to come forward and say, I'm having these problems, because you're supposed to be the Christian leader. You're supposed to be the person who knows how to pray through. And there is this guilt and pressure.
Absolutely.
As a missionary, can you just talk a little bit to that, especially if we have a listener who's in ministry and struggling so much in this way?
Absolutely. As a missionary, you're already living in a glass bowl.
Very much.
Your life is an open book, at least to the very people that you are ministering to. There is nothing hidden. They know what is happening in your life. And so that's part of it. But then as far as the supporters and your mission organization, it was, I felt trapped because I did not know where to go and even what to say. If I had the opportunity to try and express what was happening, today I know we would probably have been given the advice to go for marriage counseling.
Yes.
But that was not going to be the solution. So, you're captured by the fear of reputation, of the impact on your finances. We were living by faith. So people were supporting us. What would happen? So those were all subconscious fears. It felt like I was captured and I just couldn't get out of it, and honestly, if I look back to my life in that time, it was such a dark time. And yet, I knew that God was with me. I never, ever felt that he had left me, but I did not know how to get out of it. And this continued in my life for another 6 years. That's a long time. I was so isolated that my ex had even controlled the amount of communication that I had with my children, because the burnout and the depression became the scapegoat, the go-to reason. But it was beautifully covered up under the pretense of him caring for me and watching out for me. But it was really an excuse to keep me where I was and under his power and his control.
What do you mean? Did he only let you call them certain hours, or
yes, if my children called, he would say things, and I did not know this. I only found this out recently when my children told me. They would call to speak to me, and he would say, yeah, mom can't speak now, she's not feeling well, and I have to make sure that she's emotionally going to be stable and well, so you need to call at another time or something like that. He was micromanaging me on all levels. I had no access to finances, even to buy something as simple as a cool drink. I had to ask him for money. I was treated like an invalid and a person unable to make any decisions. And I was in such a state that I accepted it. How sad is that? I couldn't function. was only in 2017 our time in Zambia finished and we returned to South Africa. And it was in 2020 when a close and trusted friend spoke to me. And that was my awakening moment. That was my aha moment. And I realized that I was in an emotionally abusive marriage. That was such a shock to me.
What did that friend say to you that opened your eyes?
I had confided in her that I was really struggling in my marriage, and she was also a missionary, and a single missionary, and had befriended both of us, and she had observed the interactions between us. And this particular time I went and I saw her privately, and she said to me, look, he's not going to change, you can only work on yourself. And these are the words that she said. He shows a lot of narcissistic tendencies in the way that he's treating you and other people. And when she said that, it was like a light bulb that had gone on in my head. And we use the term narcissism very loosely. I mean, I know what that means. I knew what that meant, but in this context, and so I jumped on the internet and I started searching, and of course one thing led to another, and I realized that there was something about narcissistic abuse, something like covert narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse. And I started putting those things together. But here, there's a lot of information out there, and it's good, but I felt that it lacked, most of those things lacked a spiritual component. I wanted to know what the Bible said about this. Yes. What does the Bible say? And I stumbled across Leslie's website. And I asked to receive her newsletter. And then finally, I joined Conquer on a scholarship in October 2021.
And for those who don't know, Conquer is a private membership group that Leslie opens twice a year to women. And it's such an affordable monthly membership. But for you, being in another country, it was a different story. And so that scholarship that somebody provided was so powerful for you.
I tell you, I want to tell you that Conquer literally saved my life, because I felt that it was such a timely gift from God. I can't fully express my appreciation. I had become so focused on my ex's toxic behavior towards me. I was bitter and resentful and filled with anger. Although I had knowledge about what was happening, I wasn't moving forward. I was stuck. Mm-hmm. And when I joined Conquer, finally, it gave me a biblical understanding of abuse. And it equipped me with the tools to maintain my integrity as a godly woman, whilst refusing for the abuse to continue. And Conquer systematically took me through the stages that I needed to go through for healing and growth. I learned so much. Oh my goodness. I learned, first of all, that I am not responsible for his emotional well-being. I learned that I had choices. I can choose to live in denial, or I can choose to live in truth. And I decided no more pretending. From now on, I'm standing in the truth. And I had to find out what was the truth about my ex, what was the truth about me, and what was the truth, what God said about this whole thing. And I learned about my big circle and defining who I wanted to be, What kind of woman did I want to be? How did I want to show up? I found my voice, but I could speak with kindness, but with firmness. And I learned to take up my designated space as a worthy child of God. I learned to find my voice, to be able to speak up and make myself known, my wants, my needs, but with kindness, and to take up my designated space as a worthy child of God, literally standing tall, knowing who I am in Him. I learned wonderful practical things, how to present myself towards my ex, when to implement healthy boundaries, and how not to jade and to stay in core.
Jade, now some of these
Yeah,
acronyms are a little bit, but Jade stands for to justify, argue, defend, and explain. And that is something that we are so prone, especially I think as women.
Absolutely.
And when we get into an argument, we're going to justify what we did. We're going to argue. We're going to defend ourselves. We're going to explain. And it does nothing. It does nothing except get back on that hamster wheel, right? And then do you want to explain core?
Oh, the core. Oh my goodness. What, the core is the core of this whole conquer. And the C is being courageously committed to the truth. I'm going to just say it my way, the way I remember it.
Yes.
And the O is for being open to the leading of the Holy Spirit and wise others. The R is always being respectful towards others and myself. And the E is being empathetic, but not allowing the abuse to continue. Such an incredible thing to strengthen you inwardly. And I just want to say here that these principles, I'm able to actually apply them to other relationships, cultivating new relationships and maintaining old relationships. It's just such an incredible tool, and the encouragement and the support from coaches and mentors on the safe private Facebook group, of which you can become part of when you join the Conquer membership program. I cannot stress enough the impact of having that kind of support. Women who are all in different phases of their journey, but just being there, loving you unconditionally, listening to you vent and cry, and rejoicing with you when you share little victories. It is an immeasurable treasure towards validation and towards the healing processes.
Because our listeners may be wondering, Leslie's Conquer membership opens in April. You can join the waiting list at leslievernick.com/join Conquer. But if you're ready to start working on yourself right now, consider joining Walking in Core Strength. This is a private 3-month group coaching program that just opened. It's led by Leslie's trained coaches. Classes are maxed out at 15 people. Along with important teaching videos, there are 2 90-minute live Zoom sessions each month. And we have morning, afternoon, and evening groups available. Learn more at leslievernick.com/group coaching. Now, back to Karin's story.
But I want to say something here, Julie. I'm still in the process of healing, and I know it's going to take a long time. And I'm condensing what has happened in trying to give you an edited version, but at no stage do I want to minimize the pain and the grief. It is a very, very hard journey, but it's also a very rewarding journey. If you do your work, you will get better, you will grow, you will become stronger. I had to sweep my side of the street. I had to look at my own life. I was over functioning. I was people pleasing. It was probably, and still is, one of the hardest things that I have ever done in my life. But like I said, the liberation that comes by standing in the truth is absolutely mind-blowing. And learning to trust myself again, you know. So if, I can only encourage my fellow sisters to consider joining Conquer and doing the work. Conquer is not a counseling program, it's an equipping, but you need to do the work in order to grow yourself.
I think that's so important, because earlier when we were talking about how, you're trying to get help for your husband because Lord knows he needs it. And if he would just open his eyes, and if he would just do this, then everything would be great. Right. And we go on and on and on, but that accepting of reality, being committed to the truth. And that's, I think, where the grief maybe begins, because sometimes you have to accept the truth that he doesn't want help. He doesn't think he needs it. And so what are you going to do with that? Well, you can work on you. And that's why I thought it was so powerful when you said how you learned that you do have choices. And there is so many things you can do. Conquer is one of them. There are other programs Leslie offers.
Absolutely.
Try to offer some here on this free podcast. And so we have lots of resources, but there is hope and help for that woman, minister or not, in a destructive marriage, regardless of whether your husband chooses to do his own work.
Right. Absolutely correct. Julie, I initially thought that I would be able to stay well in my marriage, grow in myself, become stronger, learn how to live within this environment. I had given him ample opportunity and time to change and to work on himself. But sadly, he refused. He refused to even acknowledge that he might have a problem or had contributed to the state of our marriage. And so it became clear to me that it was not going to be sustainable for me. I'm 62 years old, and I had to make a decision. And I'll tell you what, it was one of the scariest things that I ever had to do. I thought I knew what it was to live by faith. We've done that, all our ministry years, but I tell you, this was a next level. I felt like I was stepping off a cliff. In South Africa, God provided a job for me, but for a white South African older woman, it is extremely difficult to find work.
Really?
And so, you're in a different category. So God provided me with a job, with work, and I love it. I absolutely love my work, but it doesn't pay a lot.
Yeah.
And so when I started to think about possibly leaving, I had to consider everything. And I remember drawing up columns of income and expenditures and getting all our personal documents together and realizing I'm going to walk out of this marriage with nothing.
Wow.
There is nothing, except for a few household items that we could sell, but there's nothing. And that was very, very daunting and scary. And I remember writing this out, and I felt that, that story that Jesus told, and he said, a wise man counts the cost before he starts to build. A little story that Jesus told. And it came to me, and I thought, that, I'm counting the cost here, but boy, oh boy, it's not working out very well. No matter how I'm trying to tweak my budget on my salary, it's not looking well. And I felt the Lord speak into my spirit, and he said, yes, it's good to do your homework and to have the facts, but where are you going to put your trust? Are you going to trust in this that is right before you, or can you trust me? And so I decided I was going to trust Jesus fully. And I'll tell you, Julie, I don't know how, but every month I've been able to make ends meet and have a little bit extra to bless others. Isn't that amazing? It's only God that can do that.
That's amazing.
But
especially since you had received that scholarship and now you're able to
absolutely
give back. I think that's wonderful. And we had alluded to the staying well, leaving well, and that's something that Leslie teaches.
Right.
You know, she's definitely pro marriage, 100%.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants a divorce, but her teaching is that if you're going to stay, you need to stay well and figure out a way by doing your own work, how you can stay and stay well.
Right.
And because you don't want to be mired in depression, you don't want to be having health issues, you don't want to have anxiety and those types of things. And if you end up having to leave, that you're able to leave well, not mired in bitterness and anger and all of these things. So that's really the focus of a lot of her teaching, is being able to do that. And as the Lord says, to guard your heart.
Right. Oh, the lessons, invaluable lessons that I learned through Conquer. And it's practical stuff. A lot of it is practical things that you can apply. It's not just the spiritual things, but it's practical things. And I was able to squirrel away a little bit of money over time, and so I spoke to my children, and they fully supported me in pursuing a divorce. And so I went and I saw an attorney, and she looked at everything that I had brought, and she advised me to get out of the marriage. She just said, why are you still here? If you're going to rebuild your life, do it now. And I was ready to do that. And within 6 weeks, my divorce was finalized. It was uncontested. But if I may, I just want to share, and this is a well-known scripture, but it's so meaningful to me. And it's from Isaiah 61, verse 3. And it says, to bestow on them, on me, a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And truly, if I can leave that with those who are listening today, if you feel that you're in that place of despair, if you feel that you're grieving and you're mourning and you feel like all you have is ashes, I want to encourage you today. No matter where you are or what your situation is, this is a promise for you. I've experienced it in my life, and I can honestly say it is true. Through the Conquer membership program, I went from being a victim to a survivor to a thriving conqueror. And that is my heart and my honest desire for each of those who are listening today. And I can't thank Leslie and the team enough for putting together these programs. And I know Conquer is just one of them. These programs are put together for women like myself to become whole again, to regain our lives and to fulfill our God-given purposes and destiny as overcomers, not victims, not stuck, being hopeless and helpless.
Karin, thank you so much for so bravely sharing your story and being so real and open. I know it's going to bless people. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege, Julie.
Thank you for listening to Relationship Truth Unfiltered. Our goal is for each of our listeners to receive real, practical relationship help. If you know small group coaching would benefit you, go to leslievernick.com/group coaching. And may God bless all of your relationships with Him, with yourself, and with others.